Animism is the belief that everything is alive, sacred, and connected. My mother's indigenous. She lived in a culture where there was very little colonialism, so it wasn't really impacted by Western culture. So she grew up in it, and so obviously we grew up in it. And I didn't really notice that there was anything different till much later. The coolest part about that is that I've never felt lonely. When you are connected to everything, your ancestors, your family, the past, the present, it just doesn't exist.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Awake with Lady. I am your host, Lady, and today we are joined by Laura Giles, the host of the Modern Animist podcast, a licensed social worker and an advocate for reconnecting with nature and ancient wisdom in today's world. Laura, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's an honor to have you today. And I must say, I'm very excited about our conversations. When we first were talking about the interview, I must admit that I've never heard the word animist before. And I usually like to start the interviews by asking the guests to tell us a little bit about their life before their particular story. However, you were born into animism. So
Yeah.
why don't you start by telling us what animism is and go from there?
There's actually quite a lot of people who are coming into animism now, even if they don't know what it's called. Animism is the belief that everything is alive, sacred, and connected. And my mother's indigenous. And there's indigenous on my father's side too, but not like my mom. She lived in a culture where there was very little colonialism, so it wasn't really impacted by Western culture. So she grew up in it, and so obviously we grew up in it. And I didn't really notice that there was anything different probably till much later. I grew up with a lot of Christian people as friends, and I went to church with them, and never occurred to me until my best friend who is Christian said something to me about it, and that's when I kinda looked at it and it's like, "Oh, you mean it's different? Other people don't feel like this, other people don't think like this?" It's only really when you're in the spiritual realm and you're seeing what people do that I notice that it's different. I mean, I live in a culture that is Judeo-Christian. Everybody celebrates Christmas. We celebrated Christmas too. So it didn't really stand out because it's really more of an internal thing. It's not like, we don't put up big decorations. It's not showy, you wouldn't see it. It's really internal.
Okay. So, how would animism compare to Christianity or any other organized religion?
Well, we don't have rules. So there's no
Mhm.
book, there's no this is what you do. It's really governed by your soul and
Mhm.
your own connection to the divine. And you're free to make your own choices and how you want to connect with animals or plants or the weather or anything. Everything is its own entity. Everything has a place in the world and everything has divine order. It's really a way of dancing with that. I mean, I believe that everything's one. It's all connected.
Wow.
And so this is like a consciousness of that and living with that consciousness in your being.
That is a beautiful way of living and so different than many others, like myself included. I was raised Catholic, so it was in the Catholic religion, at least my perception is that you look for God and the answers outside of you, where compared to animism, what I'm understanding is that you go inwards. And that's what will
Well,
promote
so
to you.
either as within, so without, so you could do
Mhm.
either. Let's say
Mhm.
that I look at you and I see the divine in you and it inspires something in me.
Mhm.
That's totally valid. Or I could look inside and that's gonna be reflected on the outside too. It might be in the sunlight or the grass or the
Mhm.
bunnies, or it could be in anything, but yeah, as within, so without.
Now, you mentioned earlier in the conversation that a lot more people are coming to animism, even if they don't realize they are. So, can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so a lot of the pagan paths are animists. Witchcraft, a lot of people are into witchcraft. The foundation of that is animist. The foundation of shamanism is animist. And it's kind of interesting to me that a lot of people are claiming to be shamans these days, but don't have the slightest clue of what animism is. And it's like, how can you be a shaman if you don't have the root of it? It doesn't really make sense that it's like the ideas are there, they're attracted to it, but they don't really understand it. You have to have that connection to the divine for anything to have any magic at all.
So, for someone brand new to animism, how would you describe in simple terms what that is?
Well, like I said, that I think that it is just the belief that everything is alive. So everything vibrates. We know this. It's all energy. I
Mhm.
don't think that we can dispute that. Everything is connected. And, maybe some people believe that, maybe some people don't. Everything is divine. Again, that is a belief, I guess. But the miracle of life is I don't know how anybody can see anything being birthed and not think of that as divine. I mean, how does that happen? One moment it's there and one moment it's not. I don't know. I can't see so many things. Like today, I was looking out the window and there were 4 cardinals. So it's just a sheet of gray. The sky is gray, the trees are gray, and here's these 4 little bright red blobs of cardinals sitting in the tree, and it took my breath away. So it's things like that, these little tiny things, and you're just like, wow, that's a miracle of life. And I'm a part of it, and it makes you just realize how amazing you are too. So that's kind of what it is. It's just the awareness of all of that and the wonder of all of that. And the path for me is sovereignty, connection, and oneness. So sovereignty is about me and me taking my own power, me taking responsibility for me and how I show up, having good boundaries. And then if everybody does that, then the rest falls into place. So the next piece is connection because I do belong to everything and everything belongs to me. And I think if we think of it in that way, then we don't have problems in society because I can't run over you without hurting myself. And then all of that leads to oneness, which we are anyway. But I think there's an epidemic of loneliness. And with this kind of mindset and moving in the world, all of that goes away.
Wow, that is beautiful. And you're probably going to hear me throughout the conversation say, wow, that's beautiful. Just it's such a new and exciting context for me, at least. You offer such a different perspective in animism as well. Now, you mentioned that growing up, you would go to the Christian churches with your friends. And you
Mhm.
mentioned that one of your friends mentioned something to you, and that's when you realize, oh, wait, hold on, wait a minute, it's different. Can you elaborate on that? Can you describe what happened
So
during?
this is my oldest friend, and we grew up since we were 8 years old. In the summers, we would go to church and revival because that's just what her family was, and we were inseparable. So if she went, I went. And it was like a couple of years ago. Now, mind you, we've been friends since we were 8. Basically, she said that I wasn't Christian enough for her, and it kinda broke my heart because 'cause I've known her my whole life, and I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm not judging you for your faith," and it just really shook me, and it really made me think about, "Okay, what is she talking about?" So I began to kind of examine, what do I do that's different from her? And I guess I just never thought about it. We have ancestor veneration. So your ancestors are part of you, and it's like a DNA connection and epigenetics and all of this. And this energy is there to support you, which I think is needed. I don't know how you can not be connected to your people, even if they're not in the flesh. And that was one of the things that was kind of like freaking her out. So I think she probably was having some religious issues and was kind of projecting it on me, taking it out on me. But it did really make me think about, well, what is so different and why now? Because it's been our whole lives together. So it was just strange to me.
And how old were you two when that happened?
This was a couple years ago. So
Oh,
yeah,
but it's
yeah.
not when you were children. I was over
No,
here thinking,
no,
oh, this was so long ago.
no.
Oh, so you guys were already adults despite knowing each other the entire life. She was,
Yes.
wow, that's interesting. Now, speaking of things that were normal to you, you mentioned ancestry veneration, and you said that you cannot imagine how people can be not connected to their
Yeah,
ancestors.
yeah.
And I'll speak from my perspective. In the Catholic religion, there is no such thing. You die, you go to heaven, or you go to hell. That's it. So it's not taught, at least in my case, it was not taught to me that I could have a connection with my great grandparents, with my
Mm.
grandfathers that were in the other side. That is a gift that not many people have, in my opinion, in the Catholic religion. If they do, then they hide it because it's considered the devil's work.
Oh, wow.
So it was, in my case, very strict. If you hear voices, be careful because you might be locked up because you are schizophrenic.
Oh,
And
wow.
again, I don't like to talk about mental health because I'm not trained in that. But in my case, that was my experience of it. And you couldn't ask. I couldn't ask anything because I felt like if you question it,
Mm.
that was going to be a big problem. But it is a very interesting concept that you have. Now,
Well, so I'm a licensed clinical social worker, so I can speak to the mental health piece. And I used
okay.
to work in a psychiatric facility, and we had a woman come in. I can't remember what her nationality was, but it was Asian.
Mhm.
And she was there because she was hearing voices, the voices of her ancestors. I interviewed her. Thank God it was me. I'm just telling my coworkers, I'm like, this woman is not crazy. She just has a different worldview. And that's one of the things in the DSM. I don't know. So this was a long time ago. And I don't know if this was there now, or back then, but we have this thing called cultural competency, and you
Mhm.
have to know this now. So you cannot diagnose somebody for hearing voices as crazy if that is a part of their culture. So today she would not have been admitted for that, but back then she absolutely was. And one of the things that I have always done ever since I've been in this profession is just take people as they are, because we all do see the spiritual world in a different way. And even all animists don't see it in the same way. And I think that has something to do with your lens and how open you are, and how open your heart is. So, people aren't going to see it the same way. I mean, I'm sure you've had people
Yeah.
on your show talking about near death experiences and
Mhm.
they're nothing alike.
Oh yeah, everyone is different.
Yeah.
I believe that spirit gives you what you need at the
Yeah.
time. And what I need, like I had a Kundalini awakening back in 2012. So if you had a Kundalini awakening, even the same day at the same time I had mine, it was going to be 1,000% different because
Right.
you get what you need at that time for your soul evolution. And
Yeah.
so did I. So it's the same thing with not just, near death experiences, but also spiritual awakenings, out of body experiences. That's what I've come to find out, that no two experiences are alike, regardless of what
Yeah.
they are.
Hmm.
Now, you mentioned when we were communicating before we scheduled the interview that there were things that in the animism community or culture are considered normal, but to me, they're not normal. I mean, now in the spirituality community, yes, it's normal. But growing up, I didn't know what a spirit guide was. I
Ah.
didn't believe in aliens.
Hmm.
Uh, Dream visitations, I didn't know what that was, although I had prophetic dreams. The fairies, to me, that was a product of the imagination. Growing up watching cartoons, to you, it's a whole different experience. So why don't you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so the world is alive and there are all kinds of beings that maybe we don't see because there's more than one dimension.
Hmm.
And we can only see a certain spectrum of light. So one of the things that I remember when I was really little that my mom said, we were walking and she said, be careful where you step because you don't want to upset someone's home. And what she meant that, the otherworldly creatures who live there, because the way that we believe, not everything is nice. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're out to get you, but fairies have a really nasty reputation, for example, because they just, I don't know. You don't wanna get on the wrong side of a fairy because they can harm you. So there's lots of things that might harm you, and you just wanna be respectful as you move anywhere, but especially in nature because you could be stepping on somebody's home or knocking some things over, those kinds of things. And so when I hear people talking about doing otherworldly journeys, or doing psychedelics and going into the other world, and they have no awareness of that, no respect of that, no idea what they're getting into, I think that is incredibly irresponsible. I mean, that's just shocking to me. Because you have no protection, you have no nothing. It's like me running into your house and just running amok in your house. There's a sense of hospitality. Hospitality is super important among animists because life depends on it. The continuation of good neighbors depends on it. We all depend on each other, and if you don't have hospitality, so if you're not a good guest, if you're not a good host, then it impacts everybody.
Mhm.
And going into the other world with no manners, no invitation, no permission, and not even knowing what you're doing, you're upsetting the rules of hospitality. So it just wouldn't be done really. So kind of things like that. I mean, and just having a relationship with the land. So typically, a family would stay in pretty much in the same place the whole time. And so that land becomes a part of you when you're buried in that land, and it literally is inseparable from you because the particles are made up of that soil, and you grow food and then you eat it, so it's kind of recycled in it. You belong to the land belongs to you. And if it's a mountain, mountains are always sacred. They're sacred rivers, and so there's a relationship with that as well. But in modern society, we don't have any relationship to anything, and we hop from house to house. They're all disposable. It doesn't matter. It's old. Let's just knock it down. There's no sense of permanence or belonging to anything. And it's just a very different way of being. We have possessions and they're just stuff to be used. And we don't even think about that either. I mean, I think if you think about your possessions and treasure your stuff, you'll have a lot less stuff and you will enjoy your things much more. And you won't need that because you're already filled with what you do have.
Wow, that's very profound. I wanted to go back to when you mentioned the psychedelics, that they don't have any protection. What I understand when you talk about psychedelics is ayahuasca, maybe psilocybin, and things like that. How can you expand on that? How does someone doing psychedelic impact the other world
Well,
story?
I think it's really a more of a thing about the sacred, mundane, and profane. Everything is what it is, and it's our relationship to it that makes it sacred, mundane, or profane. And when you're using hallucinogens recreationally, it's profane. You have no respect for it. You have no regard for that or your own energy while you're in it or what you're doing, and it's probably not the best use of that. So now they're using lots of MDMA and ketamine and all different kinds of drugs for mental health, which when it first happened, I was like, oh, thank God, maybe people will get the help that they need. And it's not going to be this long term stuff of people on antipsychotics, those kinds of things. And when my clients would ask me about it, I was like, yes, I think it's a very good thing. If it can lead to change and you're feeling good, you know. But then my clients started going it, and it wasn't what they promised. They were saying 75% success rate and your whole life is changing. That's not what happened. That's not the results that I saw in any of my clients. So then I was like, okay, hold up. And then what I see from people who do it spiritually, they go to retreats and these kinds of things. I had one person out of everybody that I know that it had a life changing experience. For everybody else, it was kind of medical, it was sterile, there was no spirituality in it. And this is kind of what I'm saying, it was kind of mundane. It wasn't
Mhm.
profane, but it was just clinical and technical. And here's a substance, and we're going to do that. And it's maybe even artificially derived, like those bioidenticals, those kinds of things. When you're doing spirit medicine in an indigenous culture, you're using the whole plant. You're doing it in ceremony. You're doing it with a creation to all of your ancestors, all of the spirit. And it's a different approach because it's even like when we do supplements in our
Mhm.
culture. We take these chemical supplements, put it in a tablet, and be like, okay, that you're going to do good. Now have this supplement. Whereas on a holistic approach, it's eat the whole apple. Just because you don't understand how all of these things come together to create your health doesn't mean that you can throw this part of it away, that it has no meaning and nothing beneficial for you. It's not like that. And it's the same is true with psychedelics. It is holistic and it's the spirit of the psychedelic plus the spirits of the ancestors and your spirit and all of this, which creates the change and makes it meaningful. Now, I'm not saying that people can't have amazing experiences. I'm just saying, what is the effect on your soul? But because I think you can have an amazing experience and still be missing a ton. And when I hear people say, "Oh, this is my 50th experience," I'm thinking, "Okay, you didn't get the first one." And I don't mean to be critical. Everybody can have your own life, do whatever you want. It's not really about that. It's not for me to say what anybody should do.
Mhm.
But I think that they're missing the point.
Yeah, definitely understand that. Now, I wanted to bring you back to your life growing up as an animist. Things were very normal to you that outside of your culture maybe were not as normal. You had experiences, I'm sure, with the divine that maybe me growing up didn't have because of my beliefs. Was there a particular time or a particular experience you had that is when you realized that this was not as common outside of your culture?
Oh, yes.
Tell me about that. I'm very
Yeah,
curious.
yeah. Yeah, when you have kids over and you're doing I don't know if you ever did this, but we would do the little when you put your fingers under people and you're just like I can't remember the whole thing, but there's a little chance and you're like, "Okay, you're talking to the spirits and now we're gonna lift them all to heaven." Somebody out there
Oh,
knows what
no.
I'm talking about. So people would come over and wherever they got these things, I learned that kind of stuff from them, and it seemed like a funny little spooky spirit game. Like, "Okay, so while we're doing little funny little spooky spirit games, here's some of mine."
Oh gosh. Do tell.
So so we were playing, I don't know what you would call it, but we were getting messages from spirit, and I got one, and it said that I'm going to talk to you in your dreams tonight. And I got so scared. I mean, it was one thing to do it with a group of people and everybody's, "Ha," and then to be asleep and someone's coming in my sleep and, you don't have any control, you're asleep. It freaks me out. It totally freaks me out. And that night I had a dream. It was cartoon, really bright colors and very non-threatening, and spirit did come to me, and from that moment on, when they have something important to tell me, they will come to me in my dreams just like that. I always know that it's them because it's the same thing. It's the same bright colors, the same cartoony, and it's kind of funny now, but when it happened, I mean, it was just like, but it was interesting to me because it was the first direct contact that I had, and I was probably 10, and other people were with me, and they experienced it as well. So,
Really?
yeah, it was pretty
Which
freaky.
I bet, especially at 10 years old.
Yeah.
So, would you say that that was one of your spirit guides, an
Oh, yes,
ancestor?
absolutely. That was a
In
spirit guide.
Oh,
Mhm.
and I evidently you just mentioned you still have contact with that same guide.
Yes, yes.
Okay, beautiful. Now, you grew up in your community. I'm assuming that at one point you left to go to college.
Yeah.
How was that transition for you?
Oh, so I grew up in a mainstream American society.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
So basically you grew up knowing both sides of the coins.
Yes,
Like this is
yes,
us, this is them, and
yes.
all is well.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
got
so I didn't really realize that I mean, because I was part of mainstream society, I just thought, "Hey, I'm like you guys. I'm like everybody," you know? It
okay.
really I mean, and it is, but it isn't.
It's yeah, it's a different belief system. I was talking to someone very close to me the other day. This person is very still very Catholic, like her Catholic filter is still very thick.
Mm,
I believe other things. And she doesn't understand very well, but she said, as long as you're happy and you don't push that on me, I'm okay with that, which I never would because I believe that you shouldn't be preaching to people. That's
absolutely.
my belief. And
Yeah,
I, everyone is allowed to believe what they want to believe. And whatever resonates with you, as long as you
yeah.
do it safely, I'm happy
Mhm.
for you. Now, let's talk about your communication with spirit. So, when you were 10 years old, you mentioned that was the first time you talked to this particular spirit guide. Did you ever have any experiences prior to that with other beings?
Yes, but that was the first direct. So
Hmm.
I'm talking to you, you're talking to me kinda thing. In my family, most of us are lucid dreamers. So dreaming has always been a way to connect with spirit. I didn't know that other people didn't lucid dream until I was probably an adult. So lucid dreaming's always been a way. It's just always been a part of everything, but it wasn't that one to one, I'm coming to talk to you kind of thing. So, uh, like divination's always been a part of my life. Hands-on healing's been a part of my life because spirit's always available to you, and you can use different tools to get to it. So, I guess it maybe that's kind of what I mean by it wasn't direct, where there's a voice, there's a being, there's a but it's always been a part. And the coolest part about that is that I've never felt lonely. When you are connected to everything, your ancestors, your family, the past, the present, the future, the land, the food that you eat, the animals outside, the water, there's no way to be lonely. And I thought that that was because I came from a big family and there's always people around, but loneliness doesn't have anything to do with people. It has to do with this sense of belonging. And when you're that plugged in to everything, it just doesn't exist.
That is amazing. Before I came to, let me backtrack to when I was 24 hours old. I have a memory of my mom walking me home. Well, she was holding me and she was walking towards our home. And I had a voice on my left side telling me, that baby is you. This is your mom. And explaining everything about my life. I didn't feel any connection to the baby or the woman. I was just paying attention to what he was saying. So I thought that was a dream. I never thought of it until I grew up and started looking for answers like, hey, this memory came back to me. Why did I have that? What happened? And I started asking the bigger questions in life. And that was also after my Kundalini awakening. And I can relate to what you're saying. Although my connection is not as strong as someone else, it's my own path and my own connection, but you never feel lonely.
Yeah.
Never. I used to, at one point in my life, I used to live alone. I could just be sitting on my bed and all of a sudden I would close my eyes and I was automatically out of my body looking at
Mm,
myself from a third person perspective. And I
mm,
had the same voice on my left side telling me everything that was going on in my life and why that was happening and the lessons to be learned from it. And ever since then, yeah, sometimes you may feel lonely physically speaking, but I enjoyed my own company because I know
mhm.
that they're right there in my
Yeah, I can resonate with what you're saying. I also experienced that kind of third person detached being. It's like there is the human me here on earth, and then there's a greater piece that is connected, but not really. It's much bigger. It belongs to something that is much bigger than this. And I think when you have that knowing that you belong to something way bigger than this physical, human, earthly being, it just gives you such a sense of peace and it's such a sense of acceptance for whatever is happening here. And not to say that life on earth isn't beautiful. I think that it is. And these relationships are beautiful. But it's just like, okay, whatever. Goodbye. And you don't need to be here. You don't it's very freeing.
life. Yes. And at the end of the day, everything is going to be okay. And I keep saying on other interviews that once you lose the fear of death,
Yes.
because that's something very deep rooted in Catholicism, I can only go based on that because that's what I was raised on. Like you only have one life. And if you
Mm,
do good, you go to heaven. If you don't do good, then you go somewhere else. But once you lose the fear of death and know that the body is just like a car, once you get to your
mhm.
destination, you continue. You just go maybe from one car, sit on the bench for a while, and then you can get in another car if you want to. It just changes someone's life once you lose that fear of death.
Yeah, and I would even go so far as to say that you don't have to get into another car. I think we have free
Mhm.
will, and I think it is attachment that brings us back. And nobody has to be here. I think that you can leave your body at will because there is a will to live. I've seen
Mhm.
it too many times with people, their spouse dies and then they're dead within a year or maybe even like the next day or a month because they're just
Mhm.
heartbroken. They're just, I don't want to be here anymore. And they go. I've had the experience where I feel like I could have just left. It was a surprise. It was given to me like a choice. You don't have to be here. You can just go. And I felt absolutely real. And once I knew that, and it was not the least bit scary, then it was just like, okay, that's cool. I didn't elect, obviously, to go because I'm here because it was just kind of inconvenient. It wasn't, there was, had nothing to do with fear. And
Mhm.
when that happens, I'm not worried about it at all. I mean, not that I'm looking forward to it. I'm not scared about anybody who's already gone, and I'm wondering where they are. Are they okay? I know they're okay. And
Yes,
whether they choose to come back and reincarnate or not, I know they're okay. We're all okay.
indeed. And that sounds to me like one of your exit points. I believe in exit points. When
Yes.
we're planning our lives, we choose exit points like, hey, do you want to leave? Do you want to stay? I've been through two of those already, and
Mm,
evidently I'm still here. But when I had those two, I was not aware of any of it, like spiritual. I was still,
mm.
Catholic. That was before I left the church. But what do you have to say about the exit points and how that can impact someone's soul journey if we decide to take, let's say, the first exit point we have?
I think I could be wrong about this. So one of the things that I've done, the first thing that I ever did for work was work as a past life regression therapist, and I still do that today. So this is based upon that work.
Mhm.
I think that when somebody has an exit point, it's typically there to wake them up to say you are off track. You're missing something, and wake up. And you can do whatever you wanna do because I think all of life is free will. It's all a choice. If we didn't have a choice, then what would be the point? And so for me, it absolutely was a wake-up call to I felt that the point of that so I guess it's not always a wake-up call or a you're on the wrong track thing because
Sometimes
it
we need the
felt
cosmic 2 by 4 right in the back of our head to wake us up.
yes, yes. But to me, it was kinda like, okay, so you've walked this path your whole life. You are not afraid of death, and now you have gone to the other side and you have seen it. So, for me, it was kinda like, well, do I tell people about this? Do I share this? Do I mind my own business? Because like you, I'm not trying to tell anybody what to do, what to think. Everybody's path is their own. But I do think people need to know that because there is so much fear in the world.
Mhm.
So for me, that's what it was like. And when I um, help to regress people back to their past lives, it could also be a thing of losing the fear,
Mhm.
getting over the thing that is keeping you stuck in your ego. So many times it could be anything, the littlest thing, seemingly. It doesn't feel little to you when it's you, but you're the way that you died in terror. So that energy stays with you. And then you come back and you're still holding it and now you have to release it. So those kinds of things could be wake up calls that, hey, let go of your stuff. Or, we could be addicted to, well, I have to become a doctor. I have to save people or whatever your passion or you think your passion is. You don't have to do anything. You can let go anytime you want. It's okay. You owe nobody nothing and nobody owes you anything. And I think once we get that, then it just becomes a choice. Am I ready to go? Am I not ready to go? Do I want to stay? You know, because we're all free.
We are. So, going back to you being a past life regression hypnotist therapist, how would someone know that, oh, they're carrying something from a previous life, from a past
Oh,
life,
we
some
all
sort
are.
of trauma?
We all are. But some of the ways that you can tell is like things that you have a preoccupation with. So let's say that I really love 1920s France. Never been there, have no idea why it's a preoccupation, but I just think about it all the time. I love the fashion, I love the architecture. That's probably past life stuff. So it probably is that I had a really good time there. And when I call it past life because that's the way that I learned it. I actually think they're parallel lives. I don't think there's
Mhm.
any time, but I'll call it past life. Another thing is fears. So
Mhm.
irrational phobias is another big one. If I'm afraid of water, I can't get in the water, I'm gonna drown, and that I've never had a situation like that, it's probably the imprint of a past life. There's lots of other ways. There's can be family ties too, family stuff. Lots of family people reincarnate together and have karma with each other, and so they just keep the same dynamics, whatever those are. It could be bonds of love. It doesn't necessarily have to be something negative, but those are attachments, and those are the things that keep us here. So I think when you let go, then you're free. But until then, you create your own chains with your thoughts.
For sure. And then once in a while, there comes the wild card in the family to shaking things up a little bit. And then that's the black sheep of the family.
Yeah, we need those black sheep.
We do. Now, I want to talk real quick about your podcast because I'm
Mhm.
very curious. What inspired you to create your podcast?
Are we talking about the Modern Animism podcast?
Yes.
So, what happened with that is that a couple of friends and I were talking about, um, mm, I guess we were, I'm going to tell on myself now. There were two real reasons. One is back then, using plant medicine was not legal, but you could do it in a spiritual context. So we wanted to establish a church for people to do that. The other reason we started it was because shamanism was just exploding.
Hmm.
And initially there were three of us that started the podcast. If you go to the podcast, you will never see the third person, but there were three. And me and the other uh, animist were just really concerned about people because of that sacred, mundane, and profane thing, practicing stuff that they don't have any foundation in and don't even know what they're doing. Most people do this out of ignorance. They just don't know.
Hmm.
And if they don't know and they want to know, where are you going to go? Because most of the people who are out there talking about this, I don't know where they did to get it from a book. I'm not really sure, you know? And let's say they got it from spirit. And I'm not saying that it's wrong, but as we said before, the information is only as good as your lens.
Hmm.
And so I think people say a lot of things and it feels true. Has a lot of meaning for them. And then they grow and then be like, oh, that's not what that meant at all. So really the podcast was created to give people our perspective of what it was like growing up in it and give them some grounding in it and make it a practical day-to-day thing. So we would talk about things like, your daily rituals. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm getting ready to have this big ritual and it's a big whole weekend thing and there's 20 people there, which a lot of those things, that's what it is. But when you're practicing animism, it's the day to day stuff, it's the lifestyle. It's not like church on Sunday, it's personal. And you have to engage with it and invest in it and create it. It's comes from your heart. It's not something that you can read in a book. So really that's what the podcast was for, to give people who were interested in this idea. This sounds kind of cool. What is it really? How can I incorporate it into my life? It was really to make it real to them in a way that can be for Westerners, because I don't know where you're going to have an animist community event. It is community, but it's not meant for individuals because it's a collective. It's all of us. It's connection. So you need other people.
Now, can you tell us about some of those daily rituals you were referencing to?
Well, it could be anything, like the way that you drink tea. Or it could be, so one of the first things that I do when I get up in the morning, I come downstairs and I walk I'm going to get some water because I always start my day with water. Then I walk past the ancestor altar and I do my blessings with them. I always greet them. And then when you get the water, it's not just that I'm going to have some water for my body, but you do gratitude to the water, because water is life. So when you're in the shower, you do the gratitude to the water. So little things like that, it's to help to keep you grounded and keep you humble and connected to the things that give you life. Same thing with the food, the first food that you eat in the morning. You always give them the ancestors some before you have your own because you come from them. And if it weren't for them, you wouldn't be here. So these all these ways of reminding yourself about all the ways that you're connected and of giving gratitude for those things.
That's one of the things that I find most fascinating about animism and you growing up as an animist, that to you, this is just what you do. You don't think about it.
Yeah.
This is just what
Yeah.
you do. This is how you start your day. That's the end of it. To
Yep.
other people outside of animism, that is not normal. We have to be intentional, remind ourselves,
Mm.
okay, let me thank the water because it's nourishing me. It's giving me
Yeah.
life. It's also cleansing me. Let me thank the food that I'm eating because it's nourishing me. And it's just amazing. And
Yeah, it's a way of being mindful and intentional. It's just a part of you because you are so connected to it. It's like, when I saw the cardinals this morning, I didn't have to say, "Oh, let me sit here for a moment and admire their beauty." It just I'm a part of it. It's a part of me. This is the moment. Just let's be in it. It's really about that. So even though we can talk about rituals, we could talk about this, we could talk about that. It's making that whatever that thing is inside of you that's experiencing this moment visible.
Mhm.
So if I have my feet on the earth and my toes are in the sand and the sand just feels really good and it's warm, first noticing that, and then maybe doing something to say thank you to the sand for just being here. Just acknowledging its presence the same way that you would with the person that you're appreciating. I think that we're very stingy with our attention and with our gratitude and our respect and just saying lovely things to each other. And if you don't do that with people, you certainly aren't going to do that with anything else in the world, much less the spirit world.
Yeah, that is so true. That's something that the world needs more of, and we have to
Mhm.
put our little grain of sand in that pile to make sure that, you know, because I believe that small actions like that helps the collective. And right now we're going
Absolutely.
through, yeah, we're going through a period right now that we need more of that every day to help the collective, and so we can move up and ascend. So, what are your thoughts on the ascension process going on right now?
I'm not sure. Part of me is on board with that. I do think that prayers and joy and lovely things helps. It's an energetic thing. Of course it helps. But
Yeah.
on the other hand, I think there's nothing to do, nothing to fear. We're already there and it's going to be okay. So I I don't think if I'm the worst person in prison, I'm still going to be okay. But it feels better to have gratitude and to notice the lovely things and to give and to receive from people who also have appreciation. So I would just do it for that. It just feels good. So whether it helps with the ascension or not, and I do believe it does, still do it. Why not?
Now, Laura, we can talk for hours about this because I'm so curious and I have a million and one more questions for you. But for the sake of time, we briefly talked about your podcast, The Modern Animism.
Mhm.
What other projects do you currently have going on that you would like for the audience to know about?
So I have a private community of people who are spiritual seekers. So you don't have to be an animist, but you do have to participate. So it's
Mhm,
free. And the reason why it's free is because I don't want to leave anybody out, but there
mhm,
is a cost, and the cost is your participation. And I did that because it is an animist value. There's reciprocity, period. Nothing is free. You have to give something to be here. We act like this is a transactional world. I give you money, you give me this. But the transaction really is an energy.
mhm,
And I used to have this group before, and everybody could come. It was free. There was 3,500 people in it, and it was a community of spiritual people and healers within the city. And the leaders would come and they would donate their time and they would do presentations. They would do all kinds of things. Every week we had at least one thing going on. There was no charge, and people would come and they would take and they would leave and give nothing. And so after a while, people just got burnt out. It's like, I'm not getting anything back from you. You're not really participating. You're just taking and leaving. And that's an ugly way to live.
it is.
And so So I made it mandatory. So you can come if you're shy and you can lurk for a little while. I get that. I'm shy too. But you have to participate. You have to say hi, you have to ask questions, you can give some advice, you could do something, but you have to participate. And the wonderful thing about that, so when I had the other group, we've had it for probably 8 years. It was very active, lots of people, but there were no connections made because people would just take what they needed and let leave. Sometimes they come to one thing, some people would come to tons of things, but they would take and then leave. In this group, it's totally different. There are lots of relationships. It is very dynamic. I grow from it, which I love. So I don't have to lead everything. I don't have to do everything. Everybody's a participant. And that's the way that it should be. You want a vibrant community, it has to be because you show up. And so that has just been really, really wonderful. It's a very small community, but it's one of the best things that I've ever done for myself. And I didn't do it for me, and I didn't know that it was gonna be like that for me, but I'm just so grateful that people choose to show up.
That's beautiful. And how can we find the group member of the audiences if they wanted to join that group?
Oh, so the website is myfantasia.podia.com.
Okay, perfect. So I'll make sure to add a link to it as well
Thank
in the
you.
show notes. Yeah, of course. Now, you mentioned that
You
you did past life regressions.
Mhm.
Do you offer that to the public or is that in your consultations with your patients?
Oh, no, anybody can get that.
And where can we go to connect with you and maybe schedule a session with you?
So my website is my name, lauragiles.org.
Beautiful. And everything's there.
Yep, mhm.
Thank you so much for that. Laura, it's been an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show today and have you come and talk to us about animism and educate me a little bit on that. But before we go, if there is one thing that you would hope for the members of the audience to get from our conversation today, what would that be?
I really would hope that people would find a way to know in your bones, and I don't know how you would do this, but just to know that there is nothing to fear. It's all gonna be okay. I think, 1, you would just have a much more joyful life, and 2, that it would influence the choices that we make. Fear is the easiest way to manipulate people. Fear is the easiest way to make decisions that trap you and make you miserable. Just imagine a life that is free. I think we all wanna be free, and it's as easy as changing your mind.
Thank you so much for that message, Laura. Thank you so much for ending us on that note. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.